All right, welcome back to another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. Today, we're pumped to have a special guest, Zach Knight, join us. Zach grew up in Wheat Ridge, just like Ben and myself, and he's somebody that we've always respected and looked up to. He's a phenomenal athlete, a driven entrepreneur, and just one of those guys who just has that undeniable it factor, the kind of presence that commands a room. In this episode today, Zach walks us through his journey from dominating on the soccer field in high school and college to building and leading teams in the restaurant industry, and then now running his own thriving business, Tivity. His story is packed with drive, determination, and insights that I know you guys cannot afford to miss. So let's get into it. Ben, my co-host, how are you doing?
I'm doing great and super excited for today. We have Zach on, co-founder and owner and CEO of Tivity. Really excited to share Zach's story, some of the struggles that he's faced, how he's overcome them, and his own pursuit of progress. So very, very excited for today.
Zach, welcome.
Thanks, guys. What's up?
So let's just start at the beginning. Obviously, all three of us are Wheat Ridge High School farmer alumni. So we've known each other for probably going on, I don't even know, man, probably 25 years. But just to start off, Zach, why don't you just give us a little bit, from the beginning, what was it like growing up in Wheat Ridge? How do you think it shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess technically I didn't grow up in Wheat Ridge. I moved to Wheat Ridge. Well, actually, technically never lived in Wheat Ridge, but I open enrolled in Wheat Ridge like at the last minute because I lived in Arvada and I was supposed to go to a different high school, and apparently that high school was like super crowded at the time, and I was actually technically I was supposed to go to Arvada. But my mom said, "Hey, you can go to A West or Wheat Ridge. You decide." I think that was kind of the deal, and I didn't know anybody at Wheat Ridge except Craig Walters and Ryan Parsons. I think those are the
Okay.
only two guys I knew, and I'm not even sure why exactly I chose that, but I think looking back, it was just like a better feel. Like I went to both soccer camps. I was like shopping schools, like as a however old I was. I think really my mom was probably shopping the schools and signed off on it. I don't think she influenced it too much, but it really gave me the opportunity to have some autonomy, I think, in the decision. I'm like, where do you want to go to high school? I guess I chose the one where I knew less people because I think I felt the soccer was better. Maybe I vibe better with, I think it was pretty much a lot about soccer, to be honest. And it just had a good, it was like a smaller school. So that is, I didn't actually grow up in Wheat Ridge, but that was my introduction to Wheat Ridge. I mean, I so happy that I went there. Like it's crazy to think I would have gone to A West, like Wildcats, like what? It's like, you know.
So
But I knew a lot of people there too.
tell us a little bit more just about your soccer specifically. Like, at what point did you get into this higher tier of soccer than just the teams that I was playing on? You were kind of at that next level with the Nike. I think it was the Nike team. I forgot what it was called, but like what age range did that get started?
Well, I think about that a lot because my kids are 5 and 7. It's like they're like trying to get them into like a pro academy right now. And I didn't even think I even started playing competitive soccer until I was like 12 or 13, which is probably not, maybe I was a little younger than that. I always forget like how old you are and what grade, but it was probably in late elementary school. I started playing for like a club. Again, I'm not even sure how I got linked with the club, but it was outside of where I lived. So it was like Wheat Ridge. Like I like drove there to go to practice, and like it was kind of a commitment. But I played on that team, and that team led to, I guess, maybe in a different, like if the tree of Colorado soccer in back in the day, like if the branch started growing in this other direction. And so I was with that Rush club. And I guess over time I just started getting people were like, oh, like we want him to come to our team. It was like my mom's like, well, do you want to stay on this team or like do you want to move that team? I was like, well, let's check out this new team or whatever. And so I traded teams, and eventually in high school, like I was on the Rush team that was number one in the region, Western region, which is pretty competitive. We were going to the national tournaments. We were playing in front of college scouts. We had college showcase tournaments, all this, like, just a lot of activity around what the next step was, which back in the day was college. Now there's like MLS. There's so much more MLS and I think opportunity outside of progression. But I personally am glad that I went to college, and I don't think I was mature enough back then or good enough to play in the whatever the next level outside of college was. But definitely college was a huge focus of mine through that club. And it was, it just, I guess I wasn't always the best player. I never was the best player. Actually, I was a defender. So I wasn't like good in a lot of ways. These people or players get recognized, but I think people just liked me because I was big and physical and maybe a little wild, and hard to, they maybe saw something on the defensive side that was, and I loved it. I loved playing, and felt good to get that feedback about, like, you're good, move up, or we like you, like, do you want to come to this team? And then you had this, level of new guy. Now that we're talking about it, I guess that's kind of was used to it.
Was there a person in that time that was like your mentor that really stood out that you got a lot of just advice from that? Because that's something that's pretty rare for people in high school to be going that direction and involved in a club or a team outside of just kind of what exists at the high school. It just feels like you're kind of detached in a way from, you had like two different social circles, probably two different, groups of people that are influencing you. Was there any like advice that you got from that soccer team that really you carried forward onto your business career?
Absolutely. Think about it. I had a lot of mentors in a lot of different ways. Some of those mentors, like, we all, I think, shared. And then we had like mentor, like the anti-mentor, and one would go down a little rabbit hole right now for Ben. But like one mentor that we had that, like, I don't think was, he wasn't like, it definitely wasn't at the top 25, but like, he was one of those guys I'll never forget. But it was our basketball coach, freshman year, Coach Pearson. Remember that guy?
Yes.
I sucked at basketball, and maybe it was like one was like, it was, I played only for like 1 year before that in eighth grade. This guy, Jared
Yeah.
Ulrich, who no one ever, you guys might probably never knew, went to A West because he was like, "Hey Zach, you should go out for basketball because you're like really like tall and physical." And I was like, "Well, that sounds fun." And I had a pair of the Dion Sanders. They were like, they weren't basketball shoes, but they're like kind of basketball shoes. Anyways, so then Ben and I, we played basketball at Wheat Ridge, and like, Ben was really good. I was terrible. And our coach was like, I think the varsity coach, he was good. Like, I really liked him. He might be like one of the more coaches that I would remember like fondly. What was his name? Coach Dowd.
Down. Yeah.
Coach Dowd. Maybe a controversial guy too, but I loved him. And but Coach Pearson, right? Was that his name? Coach
Perez.
Perez. Yeah, I remember it now. One time at practice, like, because I sucked, and like, I would foul out like early on and like every game, and it was probably like, as a coach, he just, it was freshman, so like, I guess everyone made it, but I had the ball at like a 3-point shot, like, and he's like, you can't make it, and he was serious, like, he wasn't like, oh, man, he probably can make it, like I do it to my kids, like, come on, man, let's go, but like, I fucking drained that shot. And that was like my highlight of my basketball career, was like, the coach was like, you're not like a two shooter or whatever the number was. I was like, yeah, definitely a 5 or 1 or whatever the like tall guy was. And I drained that three, and like, I think that was like, it's my pinnacle. Did you feel like you learned anything? I mean, you played basketball for a while. Did you play varsity?
I never played varsity. I played JV, and so I quit after my sophomore year, then transitioned into running.
Yeah.
And basketball was one of those things for me that, looking back, you mentioned just kind of your maturity a minute ago, and I think for me, if someone had like sat me down, I always had a very incredible work ethic, but I was putting that into the wrong things.
Yeah.
I was literally like 4'10", 95 pounds my freshman year. And if someone would have sat me down, or if I would have had the maturity to realize, I'm going to take this work ethic and put it into something else that I can really, go be great at, I think I would have done things a little bit differently.
But you would just drain threes from like, I mean, you were the guy. Like if I were the only guy on our team, like we had Eric, there were a few other like tall, like, but maybe not Eric, but like Corey. But you would like just sink in threes, like from like it was like you were like the Steph Curry of Wheat Ridge freshman team, dude. So I just
That's right. Yeah, the Steph Curry of third level
and
before.
I think you and me, and the other thing, a reason they basketball guys love me, and it's probably you and I were always the first ones like on that. I remember I'd like look over and it was like all these dudes would be dying on the suicide, and it was like you and me were like crushing our own team. But it was like at the end of the practice when you're like, this sucks. Like we're just getting crushed. Anyways,
Yeah, those are a
weird.
lot of fun memories. Even the practices, uh, down at the
That's
middle
almost all
school,
I
or
remember.
yeah, yeah. I mean, those were. I look back at that time, and just a lot of appreciation and thankfulness for our time there.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to before we move
So
on,
yeah,
I want to ask you guys a little bit more about just athlete mindset, specific, I think, to more to running than soccer, since both of you guys are also on the cross country and track teams. Like what sets people apart that get to that higher level? You're talking even just about these suicides, and you guys are the two that are remaining at the end, kind of looking at each other. Is it a kind of a chip on your shoulder? Is it just the ability to push through certain levels of pain? Like, what do you? I'd like to hear both of your perspectives on this, and on like how you're able to kind of get to that next level, because especially at that young of an age, that's kind of rare. And I think both of you guys definitely had that, and that probably helped both of you guys get to a higher level in sports. Let's maybe start with Zach. What about you, bud?
no, it's a great question. I think about it a lot. Like what separates like the difference like in performance and and I think for me, I guess the reason why maybe I excelled in athletics and I wasn't as scared of the fitness as a lot of people are was just like I think from like having to walk and like I used to have to like if I wanted to go somewhere I would have to get there like I would skateboard or ride a bike or I didn't have I don't know so it was like and maybe I also think about this like do what you're told like I don't know this person is like do this and like I'm kind of probably just generally fit from growing up like having to like pedal or push or and it didn't nothing was like so far. I ran a 5K with I have a little brother, he's 17. It's like it's a trip. I could be his uncle, but he's my half brother. And I ran a 5K with him and like 5K to me is like it's like 20 minutes or 25 minutes and it's over. It's like but to him it was an eternity. And I think like it's this repetition over time. And so having just been running and working and I played soccer and the coach was like, run, do this, do this, do this. Like it never, I don't even know that I was like trying to be the first one necessarily. I would just eventually become the first one because people were getting tired and I wasn't. But I think it's definitely a multi-dimensional question. And I think there's something there, like a through line for progress for sure.
I like that idea of like the environment that you're in, and I never really thought about that before, but that does make perfect sense. Just knowing a little bit more about you and your background, just how you had a little bit maybe more struggles at times just to get places where you had a little bit more of a built up toughness than the other kids. It's cool.
Yeah, what I was going to add to that, I have some similarities where, I never really had a car, so I was doing a lot of those same things. Like if you want to go to that friend's house, like you got to figure out how to get there and, riding the bike or running over there. I think when you get used to doing things that are challenging, it makes you mentally fit too, mentally strong, and you're not as phased by as much as some of those other things. And I think the foundation for that is just being disciplined, getting the habit of being disciplined. I learned that just from playing baseball and basketball when I was younger. I would go out, and even though I didn't have a mentor or someone to go play with me, I was out there trying to learn and grow and improve on my own. And when you're doing that day after day, it gives you confidence. And then I think you just start to believe and feel a different way. And you want to go do those runs harder or those workouts in the gym harder. And you can kind of, you know, take what you've learned there and apply it to other areas of your life.
So with
Yeah, for sure.
cross country, when you guys were both doing that, did you feel like when you were trying to improve, was it more about competing against your teammates to try and, for example, like for Ben, for you to beat Zach, or Zach for you to, beat Ben or another guy on the team? Or is it more about just improving on your time? I feel like it's a very unique sport where it's a team sport, yet you are kind of competing for that same top spot or top spots. Did you guys look at that? Because that's a different type of a sport than a team sport, I feel like soccer.
Well, I just went right back cross country. I haven't thought about like the team. Bill Michael was untouchable. I mean, it it didn't matter. I knew how hard I would go. Like I wasn't gonna beat Bill Michael. I don't know. Cross country was an interesting one. What do you think, Ben? Like, what was? I mean, I
For
almost
me,
didn't
I
even
just
like.
wanted to, I always looked up to how fast you guys were and, seeing, I remember taking Bill's newspaper clippings and just like saving those, putting those under my bed. And I just wanted to be like on the team and like be on the same level. And that was always my motivation for kind of training, just so I could be part of the group there. And, just looking kind of from the outside in, just how fast everyone was and just kind of the camaraderie. And, it looked like it was something to be very fun of. I still remember you and Eric Schliemann, his senior year, your sophomore year, going down the league course. And I think you guys were like third and fourth or something, or like, both right there. And, just a lot of really fun memories like that too.
You can't stop there. What
Well,
happened? Did Zach take over Eric Schliemann and take over third place?
I honestly can't remember what
I
happened. They were both running
feel like
down
Eric was
like,
always faster than me too.
yeah. Zach definitely got a lot faster throughout the year there, and Eric was 2 years older, but they both got all conference that year, and I was just amazed that someone as a sophomore could be all conference, and then that was like one of three different sports that he was doing like that season, like doing football and soccer and cross country, and it was pretty incredible.
I almost don't, like you said, like I almost remember cross country for totally different things. I wasn't even gonna run cross country. It was kind of something that it was like silly if I didn't. And my dad, who I have a good relationship with my dad, but I just read this letter my dad wrote me in high school, and he was like, "You're doing too much. Like you got way too much on your plate, man. Like you gotta, it's crazy, you know?" And I think, to him, he lived far away. So, it was kind of one of those things where he also maybe didn't have the exact perspective. But like, I remember cross country for, it was like just like a fun activity that I was really good at. I did excel over the years. And, Ben, I was just thinking when you were talking, I was thinking about how, yeah, like I mean, I think you're like you and me. Maybe you did run cross country your freshman year because you knew about it. I don't think start till, I definitely didn't run my freshman year. I did it because of track, which I fell in love with my freshman year. I was like, Scotty Scoot Dog was like, you should run cross country. Like, you don't even have to come to the practices. Like, there's no way you could come to all of them, but like, you probably could do this. And I was like, man, like my little brother, a 5K, that's eternity. I don't want to run that. That sucks. It's 30 minutes or whatever. It was like, and then I'm looking at my time, it was like 17 minutes or like,
Yeah.
it wasn't even 20 minutes. And I think like what I learned from cross country, you think about like Eric Schliemann is maybe one of the most influential peoples in my life because of this like sarcastic, funny, joking attitude. Like I think about Eric Schliemann all the time because without realizing it, I like wanted to be like a funny, sarcastic guy like Eric Schliemann. Like, and
Mm.
I think I achieved that. And I think in maybe some ways it's like why I was successful in the restaurants because I was like Eric Schliemann of the restaurant team that I worked with. Like, and these guys, like, I was like, funny and like Eric Schliemann was always giving people props, but like in a funny way. And then like sometimes he'd be like talking a little mess. Like he'd be like, like you run a little slower today, but he always did it in a way. But like I thought that, and then mixed with Ben Myers was kind of the same way. Like, like real like pumped up, like yeah, like you're gonna explode, and then like you have Eric Schliemann who's like kind of like this funny guy, but like and he would just run like like prancing through like a deer, just cutting up people on I love that. And I was like, I think for me, I wanted to be like Eric Schliemann a little bit, and I wanted to be as good as Bill Michael, but like it wasn't I wasn't pursuing Bill Michael. And I never was number one. I think as soon as Bill left, Paul became. I never was like the first runner. Ben, I think you might have been was like 1, 2, and I was 3, maybe like at the end. Or
Yeah. Paul was number one after Bill left, and there was kind of the rest of us.
yeah, I don't think I was ever even maybe I was 2 a couple races like, but I don't even remember. I remember practice, and I remember driving to freaking Kenosha, Wisconsin with a scooter and jumping in Lake Michigan and like in November, like psycho. And then running on this course in the grass where we never had this before, but like you wore spikes, like we wore track shoes with like spikes that were a quarter of an inch long, like chariots of fire. And there were like 1,000 runners. And someone got like fell and they got, that was like, that's what I remember about cross country. It was like, that was crazy, but it was fun. And we realized camaraderie and like, to say the last thing is Scott Chamberlain and Dee Dee are like the best. They're definitely like mentor number 1 and 2 for sure.
So before we go on to like kind of your progression in your career, just since both of you guys have a very similar, I think, background with sports, and you both have kids. Ben, you've got kids that are in high school now. Zach, yours are a little bit younger, but they'll be there before you know it as well. Like, what are you guys looking at in today's just environment? Just how different everything is nowadays, where compared with where it was when we were in high school, with like how you're kind of also leading and coaching your kids when it comes to sports, just about winning, success, participation trophies. There's all these kind of buzzwords, but like maybe just share maybe like 1 or 2 things that you guys are each doing now with your kids, really to just kind of create that belief in them, just push them to excel and also pursue progress.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll just go real quick. One thing that I tell my kids is that now is just a great time to be alive and compete with all of the resources. On one hand, those that are serious about either sports, business, sales, whatever it is, they're the best in history. If you look at soccer players or runners, for example, in the state of Colorado right now, because my daughters are freshmen, the top runners are now faster than they've ever been throughout history. But so if you want to go be elite, it's more difficult now than it's ever been. But what is interesting is to get into that top 10%. That the rest, everyone else though is so soft. It's like the top tier category is as good as it's ever been, but then once you get outside of that, it's like, so if you're willing to train and if you're willing to push yourself, you're going to be able to beat 90% because so many other kids have so many other distractions. They're not consistently getting out or putting their training in. And I think that's the same way in a lot of this business stuff too, where if you're willing to hustle and really go after it, you're going to have, you're going to be able to find success. It's just going to be how high do you want to go?
I love that.
No, it's funny. Ben, you're a little bit further ahead of me in the age on the age chart. So I'm, at 5 and 7, and I also know I ran with your son this summer.
Yeah.
I see Scott and Nala at randomly at Starbucks
Mm-hmm.
one day. We end up chatting. I'm like, Scott, when is the next run? Like I'm coming, but I was only there for like one day. So, anyways, I show up and I got to run with your son, and I think he's a freshman too, or
Yeah, he's a
sophomore.
freshman as well. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I'm sure you're feeling a little bit, like how do I communicate? You expressed this thing, which I think maybe you're alluding to, which is if someone had said, Ben, you
You're
could
just going to
be
be.
an elite cross country athlete. You're like when you were in 8th grade or even earlier, or maybe then, and you could have applied that ninth through 12th, you could have been number one. And like maybe, state champion. Is that kind of like what you were saying? And maybe you had those extra 2 years, you might have had the opportunity to have been even better. Or
Yeah, I think when you like, I always had the drive and the desire, but I didn't necessarily have the mentorship or the accountability earlier on. And when you put all of that together, it's like both my kids will have the opportunity to do so much more than what I did because it's like I can pass that knowledge down to them, number one, on how to be
100%,
like,
yeah.
how to be good. But then it's like I'm here. I'll be your accountability partner too. I'll help push you. I'll help challenge you, and so it kind of just it allows like the generations that come after us to go to different levels than where we were at.
No, that was my question because I feel the same. Like I'm really just trying to impart in my children the things that I think challenged me mentally and at my maturity level, is what, when I look back, is all that held me back from really pursuing like the top level of whatever sport it would have been. I really did choose soccer. But even after I quit soccer or stopped playing soccer, I could have pursued running for 15 years. I mean, I've run every day now and I love it. Like, and I just want my kids to love it. Like, I don't care how high they go. I mean, I want them to go as far as they can. And you bet you I'm going to be that dad who's like, come on, you can like go harder. Like, don't come out yet, or like push yourself more. But at the end, I'm not going to force them to play soccer. Like, I don't care that much. I just hope that they learn some of those things because I was a mess when I look back at it. Like, I didn't have, and discipline. You said discipline earlier, Adam. I feel like I'm maybe like have the worst time with discipline. Like, maybe to some extent, I'm like lucky or talented enough to have masked it. And then, yeah, push myself around enough where I had the muscular structure or whatever it was. But like mentally, I was kind of a mess. And I think sports gave me a way to like an outlet where I think I would have been a different person if I played sports. Almost all of like the opportunity I got in life almost exclusively came from some sport like connection or whatever. I met Whitney because I knew Jordan Hauser and he played soccer at Golden. Sorry, in my like uh outside of my sphere, but we were homies and we played soccer enough, traveled enough, hung out enough where when someone was like, "Hey, Jordan, we want you to do this crazy job. We need you to hire somebody." He's like, "Ding," you know. I never even talked to him about it. He just thought of me and like I got that connection. And that was not because I was a really good soccer player. I mean, maybe to some extent it was because of the level I was, had played at or the connections I had made, but it wasn't like I was getting an opportunity from soccer. It was through soccer. And I think that had I not played sports, you know, Ben, you and I might not know each other as well. You know, Adam, you and I weren't necessarily like as tight. I think we were all in high school like the same closeness. And in a way, maybe Ben and I were like, I don't know, like closer. But Adam, I think you and my relationship really solidified when we lived together in Aspen.
Yep.
And it kind of was because both of us wanted to live in the mountains and ski. And I found Aspen and someone was like, hey, Adam lives in Aspen. Like, you should hit him up. And, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, yo, it's Z Knight from high school. And, what's up? Like, what are you up to? And you're like, oh, I got a room. Like, Trip P's out. Like, let's go. 550 a month. Don't stink it up. Sorry about that.
$550 a month in Aspen. That's never going to be seen again.
Ridiculous. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
I think it was. I paid you. You were
So let's
the
talk.
money guy.
So let's talk a little bit now just about career, business, kind of shifting into that. So kind of alluding to what you just said, after you played collegiate sports, you played soccer at the Incarnate Word in San Antonio for a few years, and then kind of moving into figuring out what you wanted to do next. You're working for Matsuhisa, which is obviously a very well-known sushi restaurant, in a different location before you transferred up to Aspen, right?
Yeah, I worked in San Diego.
Okay. And then that skill set within Matsu is really about kind of building up the internal team of the different staff at the restaurants.
Yeah, so I mean, I think getting into restaurants was what I got into after soccer. Basically because I was so focused on soccer and pursuing soccer, I didn't like really consider what I was going to do after I started playing soccer or stopped playing soccer. Based on that sort of autonomy that I had been given as a youngster, and this was financial as well. If you want to do something, you gotta go get the money and pay for yourself. So restaurants were an easy in, and so that's how I got into restaurants. But similarly to, I guess, maybe the some of the skill set and mindset I applied to soccer and athletics, I gave that all to the restaurant. And I think how that translated was through leadership. And one thing I did not realize as a young athlete was the leadership qualities that I had and like the ability to, if I wanted to, I had that. Most teams I wasn't captain. I think I was captain at Wheat Ridge High School because that was like the worst team that I played on, which, to some extent we weren't that bad, but I, was good enough to be the captain. Like I said, I was never the best, but that translated into restaurants, into leadership qualities, which I could apply those without even knowing what I was doing or, really being aware of like the, I guess, opportunity that I had there was, I was good at what I did. I worked hard. The work didn't really phase me. And I had fun doing it. People liked me. I excelled. And so I got promoted just continuously. And I was supposed to get a promotion in San Diego at Nobu in Matsu, which is, very strict like Japanese culture and hierarchy, which I think is fantastic. I don't think it works in every scenario, and I don't think there's one solution. But if you want to look at pursuit and excellence and progress, like look at Japanese culture, look at Japanese history, look at some of the, there's famous Japanese business people, like they all personify this sort of Japanese cultural, and that's why Nobu and is so awesome and is such a good restaurant has made it through all of this is because there is manifestation of success in that using those sort of ideologies. So, anyways, I got that through Nobu, and I was supposed to get a promotion to basically a higher paid position, and someone transferred in from like South Africa. I was like devastated. I was like wanted to quit. I was like, this is whack, like injustice. But at the same time, I was like, you could transfer. Like, there's like, I know there's a lot of Nobus all over the world. Where else are there Nobus? And so I remember looking on the map. They had this like sweet website, clicking like globally. And I saw Aspen and I was like, that's sick. I never got to ski 100 days. I want to like maybe I could transfer there. And so I told my boss a couple of days later, I was like, hey, I know that there's possibility for internal transfers and promotions outside of the restaurants, remember? So I was wondering if I could get a letter and how that worked for going to Aspen. And she was like, I think she like figured out like that, like they lost me basically. And she remains that manager. She's like has grown in the company. She's awesome. She's still like we're still connected. It's not no hard feelings because that's just how it goes. But I got to transfer to Matsu and Aspen, which at the time was like a unicorn job. Like you couldn't get that job if you even lived there, and not because for any particular reason more than people worked there for 25 years because it was like you can make so much money and it was awesome. Like, and Adam, you knew a lot of those people that worked there because it was a small community in the hospitality business and you were in it as well. Like you work for 6 months, travel for 6 months, make six figures. So I really like got into that, and that's where I cut my teeth in. I think the restaurant like training programs and how to excel and what to apply, because it was really from Matsu and sort of this like great experience, but almost like injustice that I felt to myself, that like I was able to create this additional opportunity, which, it a few days before I didn't even realize existed. And it all fell into place. Like it was very serendipitous, which I'm fortunate. And Adam, you play a big part in that. Like I don't know where I would have found a place that I could have afforded like that. And then my boss at Matsu gave me a ski pass, and he was like, "Here, you'll pay me back over the rest of the year." And like I sometimes cry when I'm like, "The dude gave me a ski pass," because I wouldn't have I'd been able to have like I had no money. I'd spent everything, but I was like, "Well, I came here to ski, so like, what the hell? Like, let's like, what am I gonna do?" And he's like, "I got you." And that was like to the second day. I was like, "Okay." Like, is the ski area open yet? And I need someone to take me around. Who wants to ski?
Yeah, that's where I came in.
Yeah.
So
So
you were with Matsu up there for a few years, 2 or 3 years, right? And then you transfer down to Uchi in Denver, which is another incredible restaurant. But then just kind
not
of now.
no, but close. I did move, but I left because soccer was another. What the heck is going on?
Oh,
They
you're
were
right.
like, this school in San Antonio was like, "Hey, you want to come play soccer?" I was like, "I'm just living in Aspen. Like, it's sick. I just like got this job. Like, what, really? Like I wasn't even there for that long. I mean, I tell people, maybe I lie sometimes. Now it's in the public. I was only lived in Aspen, I think, for 1 year, really, technically, because I got that opportunity to play soccer in San Antonio. I had never even been to San Antonio, but it was like too good to pass up. And that's, I moved from Aspen, which was like the freaking like utopian life, to San Antonio, which I had never even been to, and it was 100 days, 100 degrees for 30 days, and we played soccer on astrograss. So like my feet were like 130 degrees, probably 4 hours a day for anyway. That was a weird kind of opportunity that pounced up, and I was like, I don't know, like I can't pass this up. It's kind of weird, but it
So
was like I would quit soccer basically.
so you're down there for a few years then, like 2 years, 3 years,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I
then
stayed in Texas. I never left actually from that. I just moved to Austin about 2 years after moving to San Antonio.
okay. So how did Tivity just pop into your head as an idea? Maybe explain also. I think Ben also could utilize or could use just a little bit of an explanation on what Tivity is. Just kind of like talk us through a little bit about where that came from, an idea to a reality, and maybe what some of those challenges were when it came to stepping out on your own and giving up a steady paycheck to just be invested on something 100% on your own.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think the main reason that activity happened was out of the pandemic. There's like, had the pandemic not happened, probably would not have created activity in the way that it exists today. However, I was looking for, I realized that the restaurant industry for me was probably the way it exists today is not going to be as successful. It's basically like having to make a choice. Like, do I want to have a family and marriage, or do I want to pursue the restaurants? And it wasn't because it's just like opposite times. Like, if you want to be, I think, you either have to have already done it and have your equity and your ownership, and you are like the boss, and you're sort of, you can manage your time, or it's just, my wife works Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, and I work, you know, Wednesday through Sunday, 12 to 2 a.m. or whatever. I mean, it could be depending on. I mean, that's where the game night is. That's where the service time really is. I mean, breakfast restaurants aren't, I mean, there are some, but I wasn't like motivated to go open a breakfast restaurant and try to make my family's, my own earnings for the family and grow myself. So back to sort of having to always be autonomous in a way, I always had this entrepreneurial spirit because I was like trying to figure out ways to make money. We all, start out with what I'm doing now with my kids, and they sort of did on their own. But you got the lemonade stand. If you really love that, you probably start to sell other stuff to your neighbors and people who drive by, and then from there you grow. I had a made money off landscaping in high school. Scott Chamberlain paid me an unremembered amount of money to paint his apartment that he still owns. Scott Raymond also gave me a little bit of money without any expectation of return one time, So like, I had some corporate capital investment that went to my soccer, pursuit that I didn't work for. But I tried to skate that company. Adam, you know about that. Ben, you know about that a little bit. That's, very near and dear to our hearts. But it wasn't, something where that, at the time was we could pursue as like successful income for, Ben, who founded the company, and myself, who was really the only other employee. And technically, I never was an employee. I never got paid or anything. It was just had an opportunity upside if we made it. And then in the restaurants, I always wanted to get ownership. Never would have been possible at Matsu, at least in that way. And then, we didn't really talk about Uchi, which is not a big deal, but I had just missed, I think, the opportunity. And again, I wasn't at that level when I started with them to where I would have been offered something like that. But from the standpoint of who I was and who I am, I always like felt there's more upside in working for yourself than working for someone else, I guess is the best way to say it. But I worked for someone else for a really long time. And the way I looked at it was, as frustrated as I would get sometimes at what I could do or couldn't do or thought was possible or wouldn't be allowed to make possible, or was I'm learning like at someone else's expense. Like, they're paying me to learn. Like, that's awesome. Like, most people go to college and they pay the college to learn, and then they have to go, apply it. And I was like, well, like, you're paying me to learn, and I'm going to take all this and apply it somewhere else. But I also found, I was like, restaurant, like, if you don't want to own a restaurant, and like, where do you actually make, how do I apply all this 25 years of experience? I was like, someone could become depressed at that, and I think a lot of people in the restaurants feel that way. Maybe not chefs as much, sometimes chefs too, but like a lot of people in the restaurant industry, like career people, if if you're not progressing and growing, and my progression was just continued to be as like a store or a regional manager, area manager, director of operations. Like I would be traveling 20 days a month, and I would probably be home less than if I worked at a restaurant inside of my city. Like, and that, and then the income I felt like I deserved for who I am and what I want was nowhere near. I was like, I want this, and this is all. So because of the pandemic and because I was, really in this introspective point, and then what was actually happening was all the restaurants, were closed. I actually, right before Tivity started, I had a restaurant management. I started it with a chef, owner of a restaurant. He owned a couple restaurants. Luckily, because of those restaurants, we were able to get 2 management contracts right away. And then from there, we were expanding our portfolio, and it was cool. I was above store manager, but when the pandemic happened, like one day we laid off like all our employees because restaurants were closing, and based on the owner's decision, like it's not my decision, and we didn't have the money to really. I think I don't remember what it was called. Like they were furloughed, but like the restaurant didn't have enough cash to pay the staff without working. We needed the revenue, so I laid off like 60 people in a day. It just was really hard. It wasn't. It was in a way I was like out of my control, so that felt okay. But people are, what am I gonna do? And it was terrible. People in tears, managers, chefs, staff, dishwashers, like all of it. Some I had to do in Spanish, like, and so that the next day or 2 days later, I'm getting calls like, "Hey Zach, I know you know a lot of chefs. Do you think you can find us a chef for my wife's birthday?" Which we had reservations to wherever, but they're closed now. Like we were thinking, can you get a chef to come to our house and cook? It's like, yeah, like what kind of food do you want? There's all these chefs, no jobs. What do you want? Let's go. Like, so I was hustling. I started hustling these dinners for people just for goodwill or whatever. I mean, but the more it happened, the more curious I was. Like, why is there not the Airbnb of chefs? Like that's silly. It should exist. What's so hard? Like, so I did research, and I've slowly found that there's nothing like that, or there are, but no one's really solved it yet. And I don't know that I need to be like the biggest one in the world, but if I could get a small percentage of the market share of that new sector or growing sector, like I'll take it. That's how I can apply what I perceive as maybe an unapplicable experience, like to anything outside of the restaurant in a way. A lot of people go into sales, wine sales, food sales. They go into ownership. I almost signed a couple leases. I think Adam, you were there one time. Like we were skiing, and I was like, really, I was going to sign a lease and open a Aussie cafe right before the pandemic. And I'm so glad I didn't. Like not that I don't love it, and I wouldn't maybe do it in the future if I had, wasn't the operator as well. If I could, finance it and run it, but not be the operator. And the network that I had grown over the whole time was like that network is still the network that Tivity is really like was founded on, and we've grown it outside of that, double or more. But it's that network and those connections that I first had is really what has created this inertia for Tivity, so Tivity is currently always evolving, but based on, an inflection point that I believe we've really had this summer is, initially we started as a company where you could book a private dinner in home. But I think what we've learned over the last 3.5, almost 4 years is that chefs need agents. Chefs need managers. Chefs need an organization, a group where it's very similar to a talent agency for musical talent or creative talent. They already exist. It's not a new idea. There's nothing that exists right now for chefs that does this. Because what we found is that, as we grow our network and as we got, receive more leads just based on what people are asking for, people aren't just asking for one-off dinners. And it's not just private clients that have homes. It's corporate clients need access to chefs. Private clients need access to chefs. Chefs need help with certain things that they're not able to maximize their full capacity because they're stuck doing a lot of things, in the most difficult way because they don't have the resources. We're talking about sole proprietor chefs like that don't, that just maybe have an LLC or are just starting to grow their own brand or have had a restaurant and closed it and are doing the same thing that I'm doing, which is basically choosing between working nights or working in a routine schedule for someone else or being able to step out and become more autonomous in this food service hospitality industry. And so, Tivity books chefs online for private dinners, corporate events, weekly chef meal program. We've done employee placement and full-time employment agreements with private clients and corporate clients. And so I think we're still like defining our core like functions and our sales funnels, but the thing we always say is Tivity is a platform for chefs to make money and be creative. That is what Tivity is. And the way Tivity makes money is we make a percentage of sales of the revenue, just like a management company, restaurant management company would be, or just like a broker would make off of agreement and a home sale between two parties.
I've definitely seen it grow a lot in the last couple of years. It seems like you guys are always evolving, kind of testing the market, seeing where certain things might be done a little differently to be even more valuable for your chef clients. It's really cool just to see you guys just growing and just kind of turning everything, because it didn't exist before. You guys are really creating this out of nothing, which is really inspiring.
I think of
Yeah,
a
thank
chef
you.
like an artist, and kind of what you were mentioning there a minute ago. Like there's the actual chef piece and their creation, but then there's also the marketing, the branding, building your chef business. And so I think of this as where they can really focus on what they're good at, and then you give them the means to connect and you know get business through the app and
Absolutely.
through what you do.
Yeah. Through the network, through, our client base, we're responsible. I think, at first, we really considered ourselves a two-sided marketplace for booking private dinners, but we're so much more high touch and it's so much more diverse. And it really just, if you just take a step back, it's because we are representing the chefs and we are acting as an agent and a broker for them through these transactions and through these like transactions. But what I guess we're realizing is there's all of these potential opportunities for the chefs that we could also apply to this through marketing them, through growing different maybe sponsorships or even opportunities for media and press and like you mentioned, letting them stay as an artist and being the vehicle for some of their creative opportunities. And then hopefully as the ethos of the company, we're not ever taking advantage of them, and it's a mutual relationship and they're feeling I think sometimes like music or agents get depends on who it is or when it was. But, I really hope that we can grow this and maintain this throughout our future so that more chefs can make money and have opportunities outside of the restaurants, because it's not the only way to make money. And it's not the only way that you can be a chef. Like so many chefs cook other people's food. Like they never even get to, maybe if they really love food, even if they work at a restaurant, they get to make family meal, which is cool. Like, and they can bring some recipes. Like a lot of restaurants do that. It's cool. But that's one day of the week that they get to cook something that isn't someone else's food. also the client has to want their food if they're like, hey, so sometimes you're always, if you're an artist, like you might always be creating someone else's art, but in a way, hopefully the chefs are able to apply their touch or not do it. Like if they feel like it's not within their expectations and then their boundaries, like all good. Like they don't have to do it. So
It's awesome.
that's where we are.
So if anybody wants to learn more about Tivity, obviously you guys have a website, tivity.com. Give us a little bit of a background on the name Tivity. That's a couple of your kids' names. I'm trying to remember what that was now.
Yeah, my kids named Tiv and Itty.
Yeah.
No, it's the name Tivity doesn't, it's one of those words that didn't really exist or doesn't exist. But the exclusive reason that Tivity was kind of thought of initially was a kind of a joke because people would say that the things that I did were activities because I'm really interested in this hashtags activity. If you look it up, hashtags activity, there you'll see like there's probably a few photos of you might be on there, Abron. You'll see like a couple old photos back in the day, but Tivity, we were really struggling to find like a name and this identity early on. And my business partner, Emmy, who co-founded Tivity with me, she is the one who thought of it because like Zactivity, this another in a way, it's another activity. However, we want Tivity to have an identity outside of that because it's kind of just a fun joke between friends. But Tivity is something that doesn't exist. Hopefully, we can apply it to this verb, which is book a chef. That's Tivity and book a chef hopefully are synonymous. Book a chef is more of a general, broad term, but we do believe that that is like the core function of what we're doing is booking a chef. Like if you want to book a chef, that's Tivity.
Well, I'll make sure
I
to
don't know
put
what booking for.
I'll make sure to put the all that info about Tivity in the show notes down below, guys. But I think just to kind of wrap us up, let's just do one last question to close out the episodes. Obviously, the show is all about the pursuit of progress. Just what does that idea mean to you personally, and just how do you apply it maybe in your daily life or family life, or also maybe towards your business life with Tivity? Just what does that mean to you, the pursuit of progress?
Couple quotes that I think of right off the bat. One is I always kind of mess it up, but don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I think for such a long time, if it wasn't gonna be perfect or I didn't see this like, oh, I wouldn't be happy with it or I wasn't happy with failure. You know, if you guys ever want to do a part two, I can tell you about maybe 6 or 7 times within the stories I told you today where something happened that I probably did to myself. Sometimes there were factors outside of myself, I think, but the path that I was on was drastically altered. And we just explained some of them, but those times where those really set me back. And I think that for me, I was almost afraid to pursue anything because I didn't want to get ripped out of this path again. I felt like, but over time, what I found was, and this goes to the other quote that I think of a lot, but it's, I think Warren Buffett or somebody says like, success is just a string of failures connected together over time. And, I think that's really where you learn and create growth. And like, that's where the tree gets the knots and like twists out of the ground, but is stronger as a result because of whatever this adversity or, situation happens. I think there's you can either be a victim of that situation and you'll actually won't grow. Like it's it. You're done. Or you can be a hero of that adversity. And that's where you get the like twisted root tree system that like is, indestructible. Maybe not always pretty, maybe not always like the picture that we see in our head of what that looks like, but it is all part of the story. And I think without those moments of failure, I guess, or learning, I would not have gotten to this point where I think I can do it. And who knows, Tivity could be one of those as well. I mean, I thank you for saying that we have some success, and I think, but we're still pursuing that. I think we've proven that it has something, but we still have a lot of work to do. So I'm excited about that.
That's one thing that
Go Buffs.
I always share with my family and other people in my network is adversity is the gift.
Yeah,
There's so many people that want to make things easier for their family. It's like I'm working so hard because I don't want my family to go through the same struggles that I'm going through. And I always say, well, it's those struggles that has allowed you to become who you are. Why would you want to rob your kids of those? And there can be a difference in providing. And I grew up in a single parent home at times, and there were elements of that were difficult, but it's adversity, if you have the right mindset and if you can persevere and grow from it and through it, it has the power to be an incredible gift to all of us.
I 100%. One love you guys.
All
Yeah.
right, guys. Well, thanks again for tuning in today to the Pursuit of Progress podcast. Zach Knight, thank you so much for joining us. Really enjoyed just diving into this journey that you had, growing up with us and Weaver High School, excelling both in high school and in collegiate sports, building up your current business, Tivity. Zach definitely shared some powerful lessons about perseverance, leadership, and just what it really means to continually pursue progress in life and business. His story is a reminder that growth comes from pushing those boundaries, embracing challenges, and just staying committed to your vision. Until next time, keep striving for progress, and every step forward counts. See you guys.
Thank you.